to work on how you display such things. And so now training isn't just you going into the gym and swinging your legs on a leg curl machine or a leg extension machine. Now your training encompasses posing, because posing can have a element of fitness within it if it's done in a specific way and manner. So for you, the viewer, it's engaging with training more as a tool and more as a multi-dimensional process than simply I'm following a set program that was given to me by an individual. Yes, you can subscribe to a program, but remember, it is a program. And so the program can be changed and the program can be manipulated. And so once you understand this, then you can begin to program yourself. This is how you take conscious and you retake control and sovereignty over your health and your wellness. Instead of giving that up to other individuals who may or may not have the best interest for you, now you're able to say, okay, this is what I want, and this is how I want things to go. So let's say, for example, you want to live to be over 100 years old. Well, I forget the name of it, but what do people who live to 100 years old, what is their environment like? And how do these people who are over 100 years old, what do they do? How do they act? What are their daily routines? And so this can go in your training block. And now you see, okay, when they wake up in the morning, they're engaging in Qigong. They're doing a martial art. They are engaging in a certain type of flexibility training, stability training. They're doing some type of strength training. And so you're able to see, okay, this is the environment that gets people to live to 100 years old. And so this is the type of training I probably should be doing. Or let's say, for example, let's say you want to be a NFL player, right? Okay. Well, what is the environment of NFL players? Do NFL players engage in sedentary, static, simply vertical and horizontal movement? Or is the movement of a football player more fluid in nature? Or are there more zigzags? Is it more, lines and arrows? Then that's the kind of training you should be doing. So obviously you want to engage in every single sphere of fitness, and I'll be creating another video in how you do such a thing. But specifically, you want to teeter the training in the program towards whatever environment that you're trying to enter. Let's say you're trying to become a soccer player. Well, in soccer, you're using mostly your legs and your feet. You're not using your hands at all because you can't touch the ball. And you might use your head every once in a while. So your training needs to be predicated on heavy leg dominant movement that has you going in more fluid natures of bodily movement instead of you doing more movement that is predicating every single system in your body and all your limbs. So getting you to consciously be more highly focused on using your legs to aid you and be of advantage for you, and how to use your hands in more so of a secondary assist resource instead of necessarily the prime mover. So this is how you can work for such a thing. And so obviously when you are dealing with training, you want to do a lot of data tracking. You do want to have certain main movements that you are doing. I'll give you guys, if you still have your pen and paper out, create a line. This is the next thing you want to do when you're doing your program. And this is just this is a quick skeleton for you guys. So you want to warm up, but the warm up should predicate and be geared towards the type of exercises you're doing for that day, or the type of skill that you're doing that day. I apologize. So the first aspect is obviously the warm-up, but then you can divide the warm-up into subcomponents. So the warm-up should have an element of it where you are increasing the body's heart rate and increasing the body's temperature so that the muscle tissue can relax, especially if it's tight. You don't want to go into a high intensity or a high level or high performance situation and the muscle tissue is still tight, restricted, or if the body is cold. So what you want to do is you want to at least warm the body. So at the very least, the muscle tissue can relax just a little bit. You want it, your muscles, it's almost like Play-Doh to a degree. It's like Play-Doh combined with a rubber band. So if you guys ever had mochi mochi too. It's like it'll go to a certain direction and then it'll mold back. That's how you want the musculature in the body to be. You want it to bend a little bit, but you don't want it to break. And so a lot of times, if you don't have the proper warm up, what will then happen is that the body hasn't been primed for it. So the first thing you want to do is you want to warm the body up. This is why going into the sauna is very good. Not before your workout, you do this afterwards. And that's why you feel so relaxed. It's because you're heating up the body's temperature so much that the muscles, the intrinsic muscles that are surrounding the spine, that are surrounding the hips, that are surrounding some of the joints in the body, even those have a chance to relax. So, but sticking here, you want to warm up, sub-categorize it into two parts. I place phase 1, phase 2. And the first phase is body warming. I call this muscle activation and a little bit of muscle relaxation, especially if you are in cold environments and you want to engage in very high level movement. I would want the muscle tissue to relax now just a little bit and not be too tight, because you might go for a movement. You might go for a cut, you might go for a hard plant. And if the body isn't ready and the tissue's too tight, that might lead to a detrimental circumstance for you. Phase 2, I apologize. Phase 2 is primer movements. So this is when you do movements. This is where you're working on the neurological system. This is where you're working on getting the body to be prepared for the movements that you're doing throughout the day. So in phase 1, all you're doing is just waking the body up. In phase 2, what you're doing is you're letting the body know that, okay, this is what we're doing today. So the body's ready. So it's like, if you guys have been in very stressful situations, the body's tendency is for it to freeze. And the body's tendency is for it to shut off and collapse together, right? And this is fear in the body. And so whenever the body is presented in a situation or circumstance when it is not used to or hasn't been in before, then the natural thing for the body to do is to protect itself. So by doing these primer movements, yes, you're not only, letting your body know from a neurological perspective that this is what we're doing today. And now the stress decreases and the unknown decreases and the fear decreases, but also now from a muscle tissue muscle memory connection, now it goes straight through. You're like, oh, this is what we're doing today. The body knows this is what's going to happen. So that's the warm up. Then you go into most of the time, this is where you do right after the warm up is where you should do the most taxing movements of the day. And so it could be compound movements or high explosive movements if you're more so a athlete, but it should be the movement that's going to take away the most energy. You never want to do a movement that takes away the most energy at the end of the workout. Why? Because imagine you are a battery, right? In a lot of ways you are, and you only have so much energy. So let's say you're doing, and and you can switch the two, right? So let's say one day you have to do a lot of strength training, right? But you still have some skill you have to do in a day. Well, we're still focusing on the training aspect of the quadrant. So let's say the skill development you're doing is you have to do a lot of jumping, and let's say you're a basketball player and you have to do jumping, you have to dunk a lot, right? And let's say you're new at dunking. And so now to dunk, you have to expend so much energy to dunk, right? But now you still have to do that weight training session. Well, this is what I would do. I would go ahead and let's say you have to do 10 dunks, right? I will go ahead and dunk a little just in the beginning, get that out the way, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to go back and try to dunk later on and you don't have the energy to do it. So if you know that this movement is going to take the most out of me, do that movement first and then go into the rest of the movements. And so you could switch compound and skill or skill and compound, but it really depends on what you are focusing on in that day of training. So if let's say you are a swimmer and you're going into your swimming workout and you've done the warm up and your coach is giving you that. Well, let's say, for your swimming portion of the workout, you have sprints and you have 100-meter sprint, right? And you have to do it at some point in the workout. And man, these 100-meter, I can do 400 flies and 400 breaststroke, but For this 100-meter sprint, it takes so much out of me. I do the 100 meters, just get that out the way. So for myself, like I do snatches with a kettlebell. I try to do 100 snatches with a kettlebell, and I do 100 swings. And I know, and for the snatches with a kettlebell take a lot out of me. So I do the snatches earlier in my training session than later. Because if I came and I tried to do it later in the session, I know I would not be able to get to 100. Or my fatigue level would be so high at the low point that me even attempting to get to 100 is going to take more. So there's a give and a take from it. So I would do the hardest in the beginning, and then you can go more so into, okay, now I can focus more so on, those soft skills. I can focus more so on the footwork. I can focus more so on the technical aspect of it, because I know this is not going to take too much energy out of it. I can just focus a lot more on just what the movement is. I don't have to shut off. A lot of times what will happen is when people go into doing very extraneous exercise, activity, or performance, what happens is that a lot of individuals, they'll shut off. And I know this from firsthand experience, playing football in college. Like the game's on, like we're playing, we're on the field, and it's like click. So you want to do is you want to be mindful as much as possible, because this is what's going to lead to that mind-body connection. And now you can begin to enter into flow state. Yes, flow state is a part of training. You can get to a point where you can consciously enter flow state, but there needs to be a system and a way of doing it. This is why routines are so important. This is why